Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots. Special thanks to Melissa Azam, Judge Tim Bryan, Ubaldo Moraz, and Prithvi Mudana. Hosted by Jeremy Flowers and Nell Spencer.
Welcome back to episode 5 of Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots. I'm Jeremy Flowers.
And I'm Nell Spencer. And today we will be talking about the legislation.
Yeah, the 89th legislative session in Texas and, priorities, bill priorities for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Yeah, so we decided to talk about this because the law plays a huge part in a survivor story. And Jeremy knows a little bit more about this than I do. So tell us a little bit about why this stuff is so important before we dive into it.
So legislative advocacy allows us to use our voices to help get laws passed that better serve survivors, whether that's through advocating for funding, advocating for prioritizing victim survivor safety, for prevention education programs, for housing, whatever that looks like, that we can advocate on behalf of survivors to have laws passed through our legislator that make it easier for us to do the work, but also makes it better for survivors seeking support. And, is also for us working to end violence in the state of Texas.
Yeah. And can anybody do this advocacy, or is it just people that work with survivors in organizations like ours?
Yeah, so community-wide support, anybody can call their representative, their senator, and say, hey, I really encourage you to support this legislation. You can work with your reps to draft or create legislation that's specific to certain issues that deal with survivors. But anybody can do it. It doesn't have to be just because you work with a domestic violence sexual assault agency that you legislate for survivor or engage in legislative advocacy. Any community member can be a part of this.
Yeah, so it's not just organizations. This is a community-wide, everybody should be involved. If you want to help survivors of violence or in violence, know who your reps are, get in contact with them, share your support, and be part of the movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in this specific situation, it's statewide. So contacting all the reps across the state to influence or support these bills that help support survivors, essentially.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the first one that we're going to do. And I guess this is Senate Bill 761, if you are interested in looking that up and reading more about it. But Jeremy, tell us a little bit about Senate Bill 761.
You can find all of these bills on Texas Gov. They have a bill search. You can even sign up to get email notifications when a bill has moved from being filed into a committee. You can also go testify in a committee to support these bills, or you can, advocate for your representatives to support these bills, especially if they sit on the committee that the bill's been referred to.
Yeah. And so these are all bills that have been kind of past the first stage, and now we are advocating for them to pass and become laws, right?
Yes. And so this bill, Senate Bill 761, also has a House bill that is its sister bill, if you will. They say the same thing. They seek to achieve the same goal, and one of those goals is requires prosecutors to give meaningful notice to survivors on plea bargain hearing dates.
So that is if a survivor's case has gone to the DA's office and now they're going into prosecution, we are wanting, or we are hoping that the prosecutor, the DA's office, will call that survivor and say, hey, this is what's happening. He's going into a plea bargain. This is what I'm offering him.
Yes. And it has a second measure of accountability in it that requires courts to notify and verify that this notification has been given, to just ensure that survivors are getting notified in a timely manner.
Yeah. And so why is this important to survivors?
It helps prioritize their voice.
Yeah.
And, keeps them updated on the process, because while a survivor is in limbo waiting to hear what's going on, that can be a time of uncertainty for them, a time of they're just in fear of not knowing what the outcome's going to be. And it just includes them in the process, and keeps them centered, right? Because that's what this is about, is their justice, if you will.
And it's them being part of the story, right? And part of this is allowing them to have appropriate representation if they need that for themselves, and having an advocate available to go with them. And so if they don't know that hearing date's coming up, or they can't, and they are seeking services at one of our organizations, we will go to court with our survivors, and we will go to those hearings. And if the court doesn't give us notice, or if not, give the survivor notice, we can miss those. And we don't want to miss those if our clients want to be present at those.
Right. And so bills like this and other bills, you alluded to one specifically, help enforce victim rights, survivor rights. Like a survivor has a right to have an advocate with them. And so that's law that's been changed years ago, but laws that implement protocols such as that just help survivors along the way, help provide that support for them.
And I think we know, through research and through these things, that if a survivor has an organization backing them, or has an advocate with them through their process, it helps the process exponentially with court and with law enforcement, and staying in contact with those people that they need to stay in contact with. It's just that continuity of care and that kind of holistic wraparound service for that survivor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really instrumental. So that is, to refresh, the Crime Victims' Right Enforcement. It's filed both in the Senate and in the House. Senate Bill 761 and House Bill 1953, if you want to look those up and read those bills. The next one is Senate Bill 615, which is filed to eliminate the statute of limitations on adult sexual assault.
Yeah, and I think that is right now, there's a statute of limitation of 10 years. And so if a survivor has been assaulted and that 10 years comes and goes, and let's say now they want to report it, their statute of limitations is up and they can't report it anymore.
Yeah. So this allows for, an adult survivor that time that's necessary for them to heal, and maybe find an appropriate time for them to share what's experienced, what they've experienced. And, because after that statute of limitations is up, then they can't even really talk about it without fear of repercussions. Like if they speak up after it, then they could potentially be sued for defamation.
And I think that when we are, and a couple weeks ago we talked about being trauma informed, and the more people are trauma informed, and the more we understand how trauma affects the brain, knowing that putting a time frame on when you can report something is not client-centered, and it's not helpful for that person.
Right.
Because at 19 you're considered an adult, and maybe you're not ready to disclose your sexual abuse at 19, and you go through college, you get into your career, you finally go seek that help, and maybe 10 or 15 years later you're ready. And so I guess for me, who are we to say when they can and can't share their story? And so that's this, to me, this bill is so important, because there should never be a time frame on when you get to speak up about the assault that you've experienced.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, this bill is very important. And so this is another one of those that you can contact your rep to express the importance of this bill, whether that's in things that we've just alluded to in this podcast, or if you want to share your own experience, or even, if you are a survivor who is willing or in a place to share your story and you want to share how that relates to this specific bill, that is available.
Yeah. And again, this is Senate Bill 615, and this is the elimination of a statute of limitation for adult sexual assault. What's the next one?
So I guess the next one would be, it's another dual. There's one filed in the Senate, one filed in the House. It's Senate Bill 836 and House Bill 1686, if you want to look at those up. It's about protecting survivors' privacy, which is so important. They have a right to privacy. And a lot of times in court cases or hearings specifically, because those tend to be open to the public, sometimes confidential information can be made public, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So this one has a couple different measures in it to prioritize the privacy of survivors, and one of them, it allows survivors to use pseudonyms.
Yeah. At the prosecution stage.
Stage.
And why is that so important?
Because it protects their identity, right? So they don't have to have their name public, and because that can be intimidating in itself, right? If a survivor knows, well, my identity is going to be out there, there could be a lot of reasons why that prevents them from moving forward or doesn't allow them to feel safe about speaking out.
And you think about like small towns or little towns where everybody knows everybody. And if it might keep somebody from disclosing that abuse because they don't want their information out there. But if we can protect it and we can protect their name and their identity, maybe they'll feel more comfortable filing that police report or getting the necessary help and moving forward with that. I think a lot of the times it's, I don't want everybody to know my business. It's nobody's business but mine.
Right.
And, I don't want to have to answer all of these questions for people that know me. And so I do believe protecting their identity will help survivors come out and report more.
Absolutely. So another one is removing live streaming during trial. So, COVID had us adjust across the board on all levels of society. We started doing a lot of things virtually through telehealth. Even court trials started to become on through Zoom and all of that. So this one would cancel that out because a live stream allows anyone to access it. And it's just another measure to help protect the survivor's identity, especially in these cases like the previous measure alluded to. If they are using a pseudonym and there's live streaming in the courtroom, then that would
takes away that privacy.
Yes.
That. Yeah, absolutely. And then the other part to this one is not allowing anyone to access phone records once the trial is complete. And that is just another kind of way of protecting their privacy and their story. And because all of this stuff is public record once it's complete, And I think that this is such a great bill to pass because that stuff will follow a survivor around for the rest of their life. And if we are seeking to move forward and to put it behind us or to just close that chapter, having this follow us everywhere we go doesn't help with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can use a pseudonym, if I can keep my face from, being in the public eye, if I can keep my privacy as private as I can, that will allow healing in and of itself for these survivors. So,
yeah, it's just another way of showing survivors that we care.
right. And now we're on their side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one is tracking sexual assault forensic exam kit transfers. This is another dual one filed both in the Senate and in the House, Senate Bill 608 and House Bill 1775. And so this really just monitors the process of kits being picked up and transferred or taken to a lab in a timely manner. For years, there's been a backlog of kits, and there's been issues with that process, and the state has passed laws in previous legislative sessions to try to remedy those backlogs, and this is just another piece that we can do as a system to try to fast track those kits or make sure that they're moving from point A to point B in a timely manner.
Right. And why is that so important for survivors?
Because it's the evidence of their case, right? So that if that's critical evidence in their case and they don't have access to it because it wasn't transferred in time, it's stuck in a backlog, then they feel like maybe they're being let down or the system has failed them. The system doesn't care. I'm not a priority.
Right.
And
it makes a long process even longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think for me, it's like, well, if I'm going to go to the hospital and get this rape kit done, I would like it as processed as quickly as possible so that my case can move as fast as possible. Again, it's just that being client-centered and trauma-informed mindset of waiting years and years for these things to be processed or just move from one location to the other is just extending the time of survivors in that limbo. Oh yeah, my case has been open for 3 years. Oh yeah, I'm just waiting on this. And then we can figure out what the next steps are legally. And so with this bill, it would be a time frame where they would transfer it from wherever they're picking it up to wherever they store them or read them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned something really crucial to touch on is, legislative advocacy ought to be survivor-centered.
Yeah.
Right, in order to make the biggest impact because, right, like everything we know about domestic violence and sexual assault is because the survivors experienced it.
Yeah.
Their lived experience is how we ought to create laws, how we provide services, how we work to reduce violence within the community is off of their lived experience. And so another thing, if you are a survivor or, if you've got permission to share a survivor story, whether that be anonymously or not, sharing those stories with your representatives can have a dramatic impact in not only education and enlightening them to the situations or the experiences of survivors, but also it tugs on their heart because they care, right? They're there for their constituents, and we are their constituents. And so they want to hear what we have to say, whether that's through phone, email, or taking a trip to Austin and stopping in at their office and letting them know that, hey, these bills are important.
And these bills are around for a reason. Like we are advocating for these bills for a reason. And whether something has happened in the past where there was a negative consequence to something, keeping a client's name confidential. But like, we know that we're not asking for these things, or we're not advocating for these bills to pass just willy-nilly. Like, there's a reason behind all of these things, and that is client-centered, and it is trauma-centered or survivor-centered, because like you said, this is their life, and we get to hold that with them, and we have to take care of that and care of their story, because that is their life, and it's their personhood, and they're the ones experiencing this. And so we get to advocate for this stuff for the benefit of our clients and for the benefit of all survivors across the state, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more. And one more is going to be House Bill 1332. Tell us about that one.
So this is about dating violence policy implementation and safety in schools. So back in 2007, Texas became the second state in the nation to pass a bill which mandated schools implement teen dating violence programming into their educations. So this specific bill will require ISDs to update their education code, including in their dating violence policy, including dating violence in their improvement plans. What's been talked about across the state is, while there are bills and laws in place, the implementation of these bills hasn't really been followed through with. So this just acts as another measure of accountability to ensure that ISDs are actually implementing teen dating violence programming into their education.
Yeah. And that's important because, like we kind of talked about in February, teen dating violence numbers are increasing. And if we want to prevent future domestic violence or physical or sexual violence, we have to deal with it while they're young, while they're teenagers. How did the school play a role in that? Because the kids are at school a large portion of their life. And it really does take the community, the school, and their parents to work together to help educate on what those healthy relationships look like and what to do if their students or children are experiencing domestic violence or teen dating violence.
Yeah, and so what to do is another measure in this House Bill 1332 is it also requires administrators or teachers, once they become aware of the situation, that they must notify the victim's parents first.
Yeah.
So you want to speak to why that's important?
Well, I think that that's important because the parents need to know, one, what's going on so that they can get their kids the appropriate help. If the parents are in the dark, or if the school is not sharing that information, then they don't know how to help the child when they're at home. We also know that a child who witnesses domestic violence at home is 15 times more likely to enter into a teen dating violence relationship. And so if we can educate the parents on what that looks like, that cycle of abuse, maybe it allows a household where there is domestic violence to make a change, have resources. But we have to give the parents, we have to tell the parents so that they can help that child when the child is not at school.
Absolutely.
Get them into counseling, get them into support groups, make sure that their physical health is okay, take them to the doctor.
And so this is just a small handful of the bills that have been filed this legislative session that are priorities for survivors, or that speak towards, survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault. I encourage you to please look those up on texas.gov. You can also reach out to us. We can share a list of bills, that we're following, that we're tracking, that we hope get passed. Please, contact your reps, your senator, encourage them to support legislation that supports survivors. If you want to reach out, I would be willing to, I believe Nell would be willing to provide a script if you need a script to use, to leave on a voicemail, to send in an email. But it's important to get to know the legislators, the representatives. It's also important to get to know their staff. They should have offices wherever you're at or in the general area that you can visit. You can call down to Austin. Their emails are available online. Most of them have Facebook pages that provides, an avenue to their website, or if they have Messenger, you can send them a message. But it's important that we collectively collaborate on advocating in the legislative session. This is the 89th. There won't be another one for another 2 years. So it's important that we act on this.
Yeah. And if you don't know who your rep is, a quick Google search will tell you who that is. And really, it does take a community. And so if one of these bills piques your interest, look it up and shoot your rep an email, call them, because we can't do this without our community backing us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you or a loved one are experiencing violence, the Women's Center's hotline is 800-441-5555.
And the East Texas Crisis Center is 903-595-5591.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots.